This week on Reliving the Extreme, we are reviewing the episode of ECW Hardcore TV from September the 24th, 1996. Nate Maxon here with you, your host, along with my brother Aaron.
Hello, everybody.
And unfortunately, neither one of us have heard from Chad today. Like I told Aaron, I was reading in the news. I know a lot of people are being affected by the hurricane, and there is some power outages and things in Tennessee. Hoping to hear from Chad soon, but we haven't heard from him today, so I'm assuming maybe he's experiencing some power outages or internet outages or something down there. So, Chad, be safe, and also want to send out a couple other shout outs for people in the WNR podcast family. A guy you've heard do co-hosting and guest hosting on this show, Mark Brew. Also, he lives in Georgia. Also, he was telling me today they're going to be 4 days without power. So best wishes to him and his family, and hopefully they can get that shit turned back on quicker. And then also just one more thing. I am happy to say that our man, our buddy, our good friend, Archie Mitchell, left the hospital today, cancer-free. We love you, Arch, and glad to hear it, buddy.
Yes, I agree with that. And much love to Arch. And like you said, with Chad and Brew with their power outages, luckily here in Ohio, it's just rain and wind.
Yeah,
It's
we
not
get
real
we get
bad,
the
but
we get the hurricane's hat up here, like
yeah, or it's taint or whatever it is.
yeah. No hairy situations up here. It's usually just the aftermath, like the wind and the rain, which you've got going on
Yeah.
here. But that being said, shout out to all of our podcasting brothers. Hopefully we get everything back to normal next week. And this is going to be probably a shorter show. Like Aaron and I were discussing, this isn't a bad episode of ECW. It's just another one of those episodes where 3/4 of the episode is one match. And unless we discuss every move in the match to make the show as long as the match, it doesn't work.
Well,
So
that's not gonna happen because I don't have those breakdown notes.
yeah, same here. So to kill a little time at the beginning of the show, I know last week I didn't think we were going to go an hour, and we did. So the little thing that I had planned for last week, if you want to, Aaron, indulge me, we can play this little game this week, just you and I.
Okay.
What it is I just put together 4 of these. But you know those things on the internet that you see where it's like you have to pick one of these 2. Pick one. McDonald's Big Mac or Burger King Whopper, something like that.
Yeah.
So I got a few of those for pro wrestling. So for the first one, you have to pick one. Let's say, I don't know. You only get to watch the match.
Is this pick one to go? Like
No, not pick one to go, but like you have to decide which one is ultimately better.
Okay.
And I have a different kind of theme for each one. So, would you rather only be able to watch the matches of Bret the Hitman Hart or Big Van Vader?
I would say Bret.
Okay. Any reasoning or just personal preference or?
Well, personal preference, and I also think that Bret had and this isn't going to be a knock on Vader at all.
No,
but by like 98, the people he was put with and the way he was used, I wouldn't want to watch those matches again. But Bret never really had a bad one until Goldberg knocked his block off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the in work or in ring body of work, I'd say Bret.
Bret was my choice too.
Vader. I don't want to watch Vader versus Mark Henry.
Right.
Ever again. I'll watch it, but if I never had to see it again, I'd never want to see it again. But if you told me I couldn't watch Brett versus Benoit from that Nitro, I'd be like, God damn it. So yeah, I'd go Brett.
All right, and that was kind of my choice too. I honestly, most of the Vader stuff that I would miss would be either, and again, I say all the time, I'm not a big I watch Japanese wrestling guy, but Vader's one of the guys who I've watched a lot of his Japanese stuff, and it's amazing. And then of course some of the WCW stuff with Sting and stuff. But yeah, I if I had to choose, I'd pick Brett. Okay, thinking of, I just thought of Dr. Evil. On the whole, Preparation H. But thinking of the
Alan Parsons. I call it the Alan Parsons
project. And Scott's like, dick. If you're thinking about the whole promotion from beginning to end, and you're going to watch one, your preference ECW or Smoky Mountain Wrestling? I know we're doing an ECW podcast here, but we also all that watch this show love Smoky Mountain Wrestling as well. Which one do you think is better?
All together from beginning to end, I'd give the nod to Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
We're in agreement again.
And
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because I know we do an ECW podcast, and I'm not even gonna be a guy that says like I don't hate like ECW even up until the end of it, but Smoky Mountain didn't overextend its value. You know what I mean? And it didn't it ended when it should have ended, and ended on a high note, and ECW kind of ended on a whimper. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, and my thing also, and I've said it on the show many times. To me, actually, if it would have been financially, fiscally possible, Smoky Mountain going on longer than ECW, I think Smoky Mountain still would have had a better record and better staying power because of the type of promotion it was and the way that Cornette booked. Whereas ECW, to me, after Barely Legal, the first Barely Legal, and I'm not saying there aren't good wrestlers, and I'm not saying there aren't some good shows after, of course there are, but after the first pay-per-view, ECW slowly starts to ticker down. We are in the prime of it right now, at the height of it. The stars that are in it right now are the cornerstone ECW. And you know, I know it suffered a lot from the talent rating and stuff, but also I don't think that the way that the promotion was presented could have lasted. Paulie would have had to change the way that he promoted because it got stale. You know,
yeah.
To me, as a you know, toward the end, it got stale. Just, I don't know. And again, there were some great matches. There were some great shows. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think Smoky Mountain honestly stands the test of time better.
Yeah.
All right. Next, making you pick a manager. And I know this is an easy one, but I made it as hard as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna try to put somebody up against this one guy, there's only one other guy you can really put up against him. Pick a manager. You got to pick between Bobby Heenan and Freddie Blassie.
Well,
As I pick the manager, I'm not saying, you know, because I know a lot of times people have they get the funness with Bobby caught up with also his broadcasting career and stuff, but I'm just talking as a manager.
I know, and I was gonna answer it that way. just as a straight up manager, and this shouldn't come as any surprise to you because we've known each other forever and you know how I feel about this guy. Just as a straight up manager, I'd say Fred Blassie. Because like Bobby was everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bobby was the manager, the wrestler, the commentator, the character. But other than like, I don't want to say it. Like Bobby never changed his demeanor or his whatever by the person that he managed, but Blassie would. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like Blassie wore the whatever you call it, the
The
like the
turban.
Sheik wore
Yeah.
and that wasn't a turban or whatever, but like the scarf. I don't even know what you call it, but you know what I'm saying. Like
Mm-hmm.
Blassie adapted to the people that he was working with as a manager, and um, I'd say Blassie just as an entertainer, as a manager, I'd give him the nod. But Bobby is the overall. You can't
Yeah.
top him.
Yeah.
Like, did you just see
Absolutely.
what Hogan said about Bobby?
I don't think so.
He was on some podcast that's not ours, obviously, but they asked Hogan who the you know, a lot of times we talk about like Hogan's like a bullshitter and he says whatever. This is something where it didn't like this is a time where I think he was being honest because he didn't um gain anything out of saying it. They asked him who he thought was they asked Hogan who he thought was the best wrestler of all time, like wrestler, and he said Bobby Heenan. He said as a worker, Bobby Heenan was better than Macho Man, Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair. He was like he was the fucking man, and nobody was better than him in that aspect of being able to take bumps and work with anybody and do all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't say that about Freddie. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And I'm not knocking Freddie Blassie as a wrestler.
Well,
Obviously, it was a different time.
be honest, how much of Freddie Blassie as a wrestler have you actually seen? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
and
because
it was a different style.
that's where I
But
kind
I
of
just
am with Heenan in that I love Bobby Heenan. Love Bobby Heenan. Like I agree with you. I agree with Hogan from a pure standpoint of best all around everything in the history of the business. He's the best. But 90% of what I've actually gotten to watch of him is WWF and WCW. I have not, although I've seen some stuff and seeked out some stuff on YouTube and stuff, I haven't seen a ton of Bobby Heenan in the AWA, and he spent the majority of the beginning of his career there, but I haven't even seen it. You know, of course I've
yeah.
seen interviews, I've seen some footage, but I don't seek out a lot of AWA. So there's a big chunk of his career that I've never seen. I've seen more Blassie 70s, early 80s WWF than I have Bobby Heenan AWA. Put it that way.
Yeah. So just if we're going manager category, I'd say Fred Blassie.
All right, last one. Pick a jobber. Who's the better enhancement guy? Is it Dwayne Gill or Barry Horowitz?
Uh, hmm.
Because, you know, Dwayne Gill is the man, the myth, Dwayne Gill.
Yeah. Um, just purely enhancement talent or whatever, I'd say
Yes.
because Barry actually had runs
Right.
and places.
So I
This is
guess
actually harder.
I guess
This is actually harder than Bobby Heenan and Fred Blassie.
so I guess I'll say yeah. We'll not talk about Barry Horowitz as Bret Hart or whatever. We'll talk about Barry Horowitz or Dwayne Gill as a WWF enhancement talent.
Well, if you're going memorable and stands out to you, I'd say Barry Horowitz. Because Barry still, even as an enhancement, he still had a gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like Dwayne Gill really didn't have a gimmick. He was just Dwayne Gill.
And just so anybody that listens to this show that hasn't listened to the We Can't Wrestle podcast, we've talked about it on the We Can't Wrestle podcast before. When Aaron and I were kids, Barry Horowitz and Dwayne Gill in our house were known as nobodies.
Nobody.
If you were a jobber,
Dusty Wolf
in our house,
Dusty
you were
Wolf
nobody.
was a nobody, and
yes, and Barry Hardy,
Barry Hardy, and
L.A.
Bob
Gore.
Cook. He was in L.A. Gore, Bob Cook. They were all nobodies.
Bunch of nobodies. Israel Matia.
But no, I'd say Barry. I'd give him the nod over Dwayne Gill. Not saying Dwayne Gill sucked or anything. It'd be like, how do I say it? It's like trying to think of an NWA jobber compared to another NWA jobber or whatever, but it's like early NWA, like the Mulkeys, they were jobbers, but they were memorable and they kind of had a little bit of a gimmick. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so when they lost, it wasn't like you didn't beat anybody. Like I didn't see, like, if you put Dwayne Gill in the ring with Barry Horowitz, I would expect Barry Horowitz to beat Dwayne Gill. If that makes sense.
Another guy on another guy like that on Crockett TV was Big Bill Tab.
Yeah, the big black guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he actually was fucking bigger than some of the guys he jobbed to. Like that dude was fucking big.
From what research I did on him, and again, I'd have to ask Barry Rose about if he knows a lot about him, but he was a guy that got kind of a push, I guess, in Florida and wound up coming to Crockett because of like the J.J. Dillon connection or whatever. But yeah, Big Bill Tab getting ready to face Ivan Koloff. The mainstay. Ivan Koloff and Paul Jones are the mainstays of Jim Crockett Promotions. Like, Flair goes off as the touring champion. Dusty wasn't always there. Guys come and go. But fucking Ivan and fucking Paul Jones, man, they're always there to the bitter fucking end. Till that shit sells to Turner. Those two motherfuckers are out there every week. They're like Jim Crockett's Tommy Dreamer, they're just there to the bitter fucking end. Yeah. God bless them. Love you, Nikita. Anyway, those were the only four of those that I had.
Okay. Maybe I'll think of some more for next week. I'll give them to you.
Did you see the McMahon documentary?
I'm into part 4. I think I just finished part 4. As a documentary, if you're a wrestling fan, they didn't tell you anything you didn't already know so far.
No, not really. And that was kind of my thing on it.
But was cool, and that's not what a documentary is supposed to be, especially if it's a Netflix documentary. Like if they presented this as a DVD or a thing that some wrestling whatever did, it'd be a little upset about it. Be like, why did I pay for this? Because I did nothing new on it or whatever. But you got to look at it as Netflix isn't looking for hardcore wrestling fans to click on this thing. They're looking for people to click on it. You know what I mean? And be interested in it. What I think is the coolest part of it is the rare behind the scene photos and footage that a WWE based thing normally wouldn't want to show you, that they were willing to put on this thing. Like when Vince is doing that thing where he's like the
About the
most like the most like out I don't know how to say it, like most outstanding or out I'm trying to think of the word. Like the thing that
wait,
caught me the most was when he was talking about the WWF is a drug-free
yeah,
company, and then he's just like
he made he
like he can't even believe what he's saying himself.
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like he makes that face like, what the fuck am I saying? Did you
um
notice that
I
shot?
did. I did. And I also noticed a couple of things. First of all, I think the next two episodes, because you've done 4, 5, and 6. Of course, the end of 6 they go into what's going on today. But
Yeah.
um 5 and 6 I think are really interesting because they dig into the family dynamic and especially the dynamic with Vince and Shane. And I'm not saying that anything there was earth shattering. What I'm saying is some of it was kind of they got into it a lot. They got into the dynamic between the father and the son a lot more than I thought Vince would let them. Vince is more open about it than I thought he would be. So there was that.
Yeah.
And then this was the first time, although he still says, and you're innocent until proven guilty, he still says it wasn't rape. This was the first time I ever heard him acknowledge that he did actually have sex with Rita Chatterton, because he said it was consensual. He actually admitted that they fucked.
Yeah. I saw that part, and like I said,
I was like, oh, I can't believe he even admitted that. I can't believe he even said that.
well, he's divorced now. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna what's she gonna do about it? But I just like I said, I understand that it wasn't gonna how do I say it? Like going into it, I was like, oh, this might be earth shattering. Like when they went through the whole screw job thing and all that, it's like we all know this.
Yeah.
It's
I've
like
heard
we
this
all
too.
know this.
Yes.
We all know this, but somebody that just clicks on it might not know what the fuck it is. Yeah, so they might
Mm-hmm.
find it interesting. But and it is kind of cool to, like I said, see that was the most noticeable thing to me is that they showed a lot of footage that you would not see on a like a WWE produced documentary.
Mm-hmm. There was one part during the screw job conversation that got me. Brett got me, man, when he got a little choked up about Owen. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
But
like that got
they,
me when he said that he thought Owen was he thought Owen thought he was mad at him because he didn't leave or whatever. I
mhm,
get that, but I just like I said, there's nothing
no new territory
so
covered.
far that yeah, not like I expected there to be footage of him like pooping on somebody. I'm just saying like
I also thought it was kind of a chuckle moment for when they were like, when Stephanie McMahon said something about Mike Tyson, and she was like, well, he hadn't been convicted of rape yet when we hired him, had he?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then
They're like, oh yeah,
oh
like
yeah,
he had already
yeah.
gotten out,
She's like, oh
like
really?
he'd already been released. She was like, oh no,
Never mind.
that was pretty. Like he hadn't already been accused of rape, had he? Yeah, like he'd been out for like 2 years. She didn't even say accused of rape.
No, no.
She was like, he had already been in like been put in prison for rape or whatever, found guilty for rape, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And you know what? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say your timeline's a little screwed up there, Steph.
And not to be a like sound like a creeper or whatever. You know what's crazy about her? She was like attractive when she got brought into the WWF. She's like a chick. She's like one of those chicks that's like like attractive in reverse. You know what I mean? Like the older Stephanie McMahon gets, I'm like, the more attractive that lady gets.
Mm-hmm.
Like I looked at that, I was like, she's a good look, and I'm not trying to be weird or whatever, but I'm like,
Right.
Stephanie McMahon's a good looking woman.
Yep.
It's like that freak and that little nice but unattractive lady produced this good looking woman. Like, oh, look at that. Anyway.
And then depending on what part of his life you're looking at him, there's times Shane McMahon looks like his heart's about to explode. Like he looks like he's got like the highest blood pressure you can think of, and he's just, I don't know. I know it's just, I mean, he's an in shape guy and everything, but sometimes he just looks like poofy, and like I say, he looks like his heart's gonna explode, like he's gonna have a heart attack.
Well, it's his head. I've always said, like, you can't work out your head. It's kind of like when like Vince would like pose for those muscle things, and or if you'd see him without his shirt or without his like jacket and shit off, he looks old. But then he takes off his shirt, and you're like, oh, look how muscular this guy is. It's like, yeah, it's because you can't work out your head. Like Shane's getting fat head like his grandpa. That's the other thing too that I didn't think about, because they showed a lot of pictures of Vince together, even at a young age. It's like, it's crazy how much those guys look alike.
Yeah, and they actually
Like
have
they had like the same like
Buffon.
pompadour hair, bouffant hair, or whatever. It's like, man, it's crazy how much they look alike.
And it's also that's also the most unique pictures I've ever seen of Vince Sr. You know, there's like those 4 or 5 pictures I've ever seen, and this thing had a lot more. I'm assuming because Vince was cooperating, maybe Vince volunteered some pictures or something, but a lot more pictures of Vince Sr. than I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was just like a regular shirt on, just
Yeah.
chilling.
Like there's that one that's
Yeah.
like there's that one headshot that they always show of him, and then there's a picture of him with Bruno and Backlund or whatever, or no, Harley Race and Backlund at the Garden. And then there's another one, and then there's that one match or that one entrance they always show where I think Hogan's going to the ring and Vince Sr.'s standing in the back. But I was like, man, that's like, and then in that movie, what's that movie that he makes an appearance in the beginning? It's not The Wrestler, is it? Is it the Vern Gagne one?
Probably.
I think it is. But anyway, beside the point, I'm rambling. There's not a lot of stuff that I've seen that like pictures or video of Vince McMahon Sr. and they actually had quite a bit for this documentary. I suggest anybody that hasn't seen it, even if like Aaron and I, it's going to be stuff that you're going to be like, God, I've heard these stories a million times. It is interesting. It's it's probably the most truthful I've ever seen Hulk Hogan be.
I was just gonna say that, like, Hogan's not lying or anything on this one.
Hogan's pretty truthful on this one. Andre wasn't 900 pounds. Of course, Vince and Hogan tell their side of the WrestleMania 3 story, which Andre is not alive to counter, even if it was true or wasn't true. So we got to assume that there's at least some sort of truth there. But anyway.
The only thing I believe on that is I do believe that, how do I say it? Like, I don't believe that Andre ever went out there probably thinking that, not knowing what he was going to do. But if I'm Hulk Hogan and I'm looking at a guy the size of Andre the Giant, not saying that Andre the Giant was 7'4" and 500 pounds, but Andre was 7'1" and probably 400 pounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I honestly could think, like, if I'm a Hulk Hogan, in my mind, I'm like, if this guy changes his mind, I'm fucked. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be able to do anything about it.
And I did also appreciate the fact that for the first time ever that you've ever heard him say it, Vince was like, I mean, Andre and Hogan had faced each other before. Andre had been slammed before. But we're trying to build the biggest card ever here. So, of course, we're going to say it was the first time they ever faced each other. And, of course, we're going to say...
I'm a promoter.
I'm a fucking promoter.
Yeah, or his thing with Wendy, it's like it wasn't personal, but that's like that's my property, bitch. It's basically what he said.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say that too. He did open up a little more and showed a little more than he has in other things of himself. And when he did the documentary, he probably thought, "Oh, it's going to be the legacy of old Pop Vince McMahon and blah blah blah." Like he didn't know when he was filming it that.
Oh, people know I pooped on somebody.
Right? Yeah, he didn't know all that then. So, but anyway, thank you for indulging us for a half an hour talking about anything but ECW. So now we'll quickly go through, I guess, the review of the ECW TV from September 24th, 1996. We open the show with Joel Gertner in the ring, doing the ring announcing, and the classy ECW fans with a nice big faggot chant.
Yes. And who is Julio Cesar Valentino Alfonso?
I have no idea. I have no fucking idea who that guy was.
I tried to Google it. Nothing. I'm like, this has to be somebody.
Because
I have
apparently,
no
I mean,
idea. I have
judging
no
by
idea
what
who that guy was.
judging by what's going on here, because he's managing Devon Storm and the Bad Crew, that means that
Oh,
Leather Lou
Lou's
Albano's gone. Yeah, Leather Lou Albano's gone. Damian Kane's out of the picture. Him and his hooker are gone. But yeah, they're introduced, or Gertner introduces the manager of Devon Storm and Bad Crew, like Aaron said, Julio Cesar Valentino Alfonso. So at first, when he showed up, I didn't even really, honest to God, I didn't even really notice him. Like, I seen a guy, I was watching Gertner, I seen a guy with a mustache. I thought it was a referee at first.
Well, yeah, because he's dressed like a referee.
And then he said Alfonso. And then I was like, did I miss something? Is Bill Alfonso like have a mustache, like a costumed mustache on or
Bill
something?
Alfonso's Puerto Rican cousin.
And then he was back on the screen again. I said, well, that's not it either. I don't have a fucking clue who this guy is.
But I figured it out. It's this person is portraying Bill Alfonso's like Latin cousin. I don't think it gets any more time than this. I don't remember this being a thing. Like
No.
it might be maybe next week just because it's the taping, but I don't remember this being a long-term thing.
Well, he does have one. He is involved in one of my favorite moments of the episode. But the match here is supposed to be Sandman versus Devon Storm. And it just turns into a 3-on-1 deal with Sandman and Sandman and the Bad Crew getting ganged up on. And the point of the whole thing is they're making the point that Sandman's a loner. He doesn't have a friend. He doesn't have a kid. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have a belt. He doesn't have a manager. So he's got to fight all these guys all by his lonesome. That's what I picked up on.
Yeah. And as I don't know if the spot you're thinking of is a spot that cracked me up, but what cracked me up was Sandman ends up caning everybody, including the referee, and then the Bad Crew tries to pin him. I think it's Bad. Does Bad Crew try to like double pin him?
Yes.
And then Julio Cesar Valentino Alfonso tries to go for the quick count. It's like 1, 2, and then Sandman underneath this pile of shit bags canes the guy right in the top of his head.
That isn't the case. That
That
was
the
funny.
you're thinking of?
No, that was funny, and I have it written down. But no, it's after he, of course, he gets Sandman canes everybody. He gets a 1, 2, 3 on Storm. Then he has a 1, 2, 3 on a Bad Crew, 1, 2, 3 on the other Bad Crew. Beats the whole fucking lot of them up. No, then there's that other cane shot when Julio, I want to say it again, Julio Cesar Valentino Alfonso is laying on the ground, and Sandman just whacks, and Joey Styles says,
ear.
"Huh?
He says he just caned him in the ear.
Yeah, he just caned him right in the ear. He just whacks that son of a bitch. Like Sandman hits people with no regard with that cane.
But now that 1, 2, and then his arm comes up and goes.
Yeah. That was funny. That was funny, and I did.
It was the best part of it too. Was like when he caned him right in the head. That's when Joey was like, "Oh, Sandman's had enough." Like it was almost like Sandman was letting this shit go on with these shit bags for a little bit. But when they actually tried to pin him, he was like, "Nah, yeah, this ain't gonna happen."
So actually, the funny thing was with even considering, the riffraff involved here, I actually really enjoyed this segment. I thought it was effective and fun. And I enjoyed it. I liked it.
I liked it, and it typically happens. Obviously, the first week of new broadcasting or new shows with ECW because they based their month of show off of like their big show they had on like their Saturday or Friday or whatever. But it's fun when you get to see the first week because you get to see those. I don't want to call them jobbers because they weren't, but just that
the undercard
guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because ECW's undercard was always just a mishmash of whoever the fuck Paulie could get his hands on at that moment. We see after that, we see footage of the stuff going on with Shane Douglas from last week. I put down here, we get a Pitbull's promo set to porno music.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, I don't know what song was actually played. But yeah, it's like, what is this?
Or that it's either porno music or played by Chuck Mangione.
Yeah, Chuck Mangione. Yeah. Somebody's gonna blow up the Megalomart.
I just want one spark plug. So yeah, we got the Pitbull's promo. It's your standard thing, Gary Wolf and is vowing revenge for what Shane Douglas has done. And then we go to a segment involving JT Smith, Little Guido, and our man Sal Balomo.
Uncle Sal,
the FBI. I wish Uncle Sal would have stayed with the FBI.
Oh, I wish he would have been. I thought that. I was like, why wasn't he there the whole run? Man, like he looked great in his little hat. And his
coming out to Staying Alive.
Yeah. And let me clear my throat. Or not let, yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah, FBI came out to the Staying Alive remix, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah.
No, I was about to say if you maybe you remember better than I do, but I just remember that music and Tracy.
Yeah, the remix of it.
Getting it, yeah.
Sorry, I misspoke. But yeah, it's just Uncle Sal being with him. It's like, oh man, I forgot about that. Like when he was first there, I'm like, oh, there he is. I forgot. And I was so happy. And they do this segment. Not you were narrating. Take it away from you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's JT Smith saying that they want to pay tribute to a true paisan and a fallen Italian icon, Tupac Shakur.
He said
Tupac Shakur. And then they dance to whatever the WWE version of whatever Tupac song they played. I don't know which one they would have played.
Hopefully California Love.
And as soon as it happened, I'm like, this is going to be the gangsters. And the gangsters show up and they beat the shit out of the FBI and Uncle Sal.
And then...
I mean, I enjoyed it.
I did too. In the end, New Jack pins Sal Balomo. But yeah, no, like, they're 2 for 2 on this show. Like I said, this was not a bad episode of ECW at all. This was an entertaining as shit episode.
I mean, how like even if you're a wrestling fan and a true wrestling fan, and you know different eras and decades or whatever, just the sentence of then New Jack pinned Sal Balomo. That's fun. It's like this guy went from making paper boats for Lord Alvarez and Vince McMahon to being caned and hit by like an N64. Hey, it's fucking fantastic.
Sal Balomo. You know,
And then just 3 short years, he went from the Variety Club to this. You know what I mean? It's like, this guy's had a crazy career.
I never thought when we started this show about ECW that one of the main stars of it on our end was going to be Salvatore Balomo. But every time he shows up, I pop.
Fantastic.
Sal!
Yes. I just wish he would have had the boots.
So then the next thing is the match, the main event. As promised last week, it is Doug Furnas and Dan Profit. And I have to write Profit down because I always want to say Phil LaFawn. It's just force of habit. Okay. Furnas and Profit against Sabu and RVD. If you're following along at home, RVD and Sabu are rivals. RVD has never given Sabu the respect handshake that he wants. But for some reason, unbeknownst to anyone else, RVD told Paulie Dangerously he wanted Sabu to be his partner in this match. And after the match starts up, we'll just get this out of the way and then we can get back into the match. But after the match starts up, after a while, Sabu wants a handshake. RVD won't give him the handshake. Then they break from this great match to go to a Hype Central with a stupid Tommy Dreamer segment.
Yeah, Joel Gertner calls everybody hermaphrodites, and then they go to Tommy Dreamer cutting a promo being all fat and covered with chocolate. Was it chocolate he was covered in?
What's happening, everybody, is Tommy's trying to show that he has such a tolerance for pain that Beulah McGillicuddy is dripping hot candle wax on him.
Oh, I just assumed it was chocolate.
It just assumed it was chocolate. Nom, 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 nom.
Yeah. So it was candle wax. All right.
As it wasn't candy wax.
I did notice Beulah because she looked good. But it was what it was. It was stupid.
I always say with the Dreamer stuff, always just comes off so community theater to me. And, but for some reason he was over. So I can't take that away from him. So the story of this match kind of is...
Brutus Beefcake was over too.
So was Jimmy Valiant. But the story of this match essentially is obviously Profit and Furnas are a great team. Sabu and RVD are two individually great wrestlers. But Sabu and RVD don't get along through a lot of the match. Sometimes they refuse to tag. Sometimes they tag. Kind of like to stick it to each other. But I thought RVD did a really good job during this match confusing you on what side he was on,
Yeah. And the match itself, like the body of the match was really good. I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's a match. You say it a lot where if you don't have a lot of notes, it must be a good match because you're watching it.
Right.
I will say that out of the four guys, the two I enjoyed the most being in the ring together were Crawford and RVD. I think Crawford and Sabu was all right, and like when Furnas was in there with RVD, that was okay. But to me, it's just like Crawford and RVD's two styles meshed better together.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you watch, and you might tell me I'm out of left field when I say this or whatever. It's kind of like in the WCW when you'd watch like Malenko wrestle Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like this, like Malenko wasn't a high flyer at all. Like he was I shouldn't say at all. Like he could do high flying shit, but he was mainly a like
Yeah.
lightweight mat based guy going up against this cruiserweight guy, and that's kind of how I felt with Crawford and RVD, where it was like Crawford was like trying to hold the guy down and do all this other shit or whatever. It's like I just enjoyed it better when those two were in there, but the match as a whole was really fucking good. I
Yes.
thought,
Yes.
like going into it, like I don't know how your Peacock streaming works, but you can kind of see before it even happens how long something's gonna go.
Yeah.
And I saw the little like square thing to the square thing, and I'm like, holy shit, this is gonna be long. And I was like, this almost like is like this is like it's gonna be half the fucking show. And by the time it was done, I was like, I'm not mad. That was half the fucking show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a match. I'm glad they didn't clip up like they do some of the stuff.
Yeah.
So throughout the match, getting toward the end of it, Crawford starts doing some of Taz's
As of
moves
those.
to Sabu, and it was kind of weird the way Joey said it. Like I don't know if it's just the way he says, but he keeps going. Taz went to Crawford and Furnace. Taz went to. He doesn't say like Taz went to Crawford and Furnace, and obviously he just kept saying Taz went to Crawford and Furnace.
Yeah, I don't know if he was. I don't know. I get what he was trying to sell it.
Yeah, no, I
I
knew
get
what
what
he
he was
was
trying to
trying to
sell.
say. It was just a
He
weird
just wasn't saying it
presentation.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we
and
got
I
the
did.
gist.
And I did kind of like how he said um before it was over. He was like, "Was RVD in on it?"
Yeah,
You know, was like I liked that aspect where he was trying to say like, because everybody's like, "Oh, why would RVD pick Sabu to be his partner when he doesn't like him?" And then Crawford started doing the moves and all that shit. And then Joey was like, "Oh well, did Rob pick Sabu just to, you know, get Sabu wore down for Taz or whatever?"
right.
And I mean, that part of it was okay. I just the match itself, I just enjoyed it. The only I say that's cool, but it's the double edged sword with me in wrestling where if and I'm glad they didn't do it at the end. But it's like if they would have done that, I would have been upset because I would have been like, if RVD was just setting up Sabu, why wouldn't they just kick the shit out of him the minute the bell
Right
rang?
at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah,
I know one thing that I wrote down here near the end there of the match. Doug Furnace hits RVD with a sick fucking soup German. Um, and Crawford has Sabu in a sleeper. The time limit expires on the match. And then we have a whole. I thought this was fun too. We have this whole segment after the match where Sabu, Doug Furnace, and Crawford are all calling for 5 more minutes. And of course, the Weasley little Rob Van Dam, everybody's like, is Rob Van Dam going to take the 5 minutes? Is he going to take the 5 minutes? And then Rob Van Dam's just about to agree to the 5 minutes, and Crawford and Furnace are like, and they beg off
yeah,
and they leave. I thought that was funny. Like it was this big buildup, like it was going to happen. And then these two fucking assholes are like,
yeah.
we're out
He just smacked him and left.
of here.
And I like watching this and watching those two guys. I I feel like if and I know they were in I know they were in ECW waiting to go to the WWE. Like it was their transition from going to Japan to WWF, so they had a little layover in ECW or whatever. I kind of wish they would have stayed in ECW, and I think they'd be talked about differently.
I agree. I agree. WWF
Like,
didn't
I
do some
really
shit.
do. And it wasn't gonna work. It wasn't gonna happen. Like, those guys weren't WWF guys. It wasn't gonna work from the beginning. You know what I mean? But I just think if they would have stuck around in ECW, I think they would have been probably there for the run of it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, because there's lots of teams that are already here and that are coming up in the future that they could do some really good shit with.
Yeah.
So we get Sabu gets a little light handshake out of Rob Van Dam, like a tap handshake, but nothing concrete to end this segment. And then Joey comes back on the screen talking about the Taz situation, and then Taz and Fonzie walk up, and Taz says that he is spreading the word of ECW his way through violence, and he's also spreading the word that Sabu fears Taz. It was short, it was simple, it was to the point, and it was effective.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and like I said, it was like Taz wants to be the mouthpiece or whatever of the ECW, and I honestly took it as his character was trying to say that he was the man in ECW, and he was his character, he was going to be the banner carrier or whatever of ECW. I enjoyed it.
I did too. And again, like I said, overall, I really enjoyed this episode of the show. I actually gave this episode of the show a B+. It started with something rowdy, funny, and entertaining. There was another thing that was rowdy, funny, and entertaining. Like the Sandman thing, the fucking FBI gangsters thing. You got a little bit of reminding you about Shane Douglas and the Pit Bulls, and a great main event. It was a good show. I enjoyed this episode of the show.
I enjoyed it, and like I said, when we got ready to start this, when I said, "Oh, it's like I don't have a whole lot of notes," it wasn't like, "Oh, that doesn't mean the show sucks." It just means that there wasn't a lot to note of saying, like, how do I want to say that? Where it's like, just because you don't have a lot of notes doesn't mean that nothing happened. It just means that it was just a good show, and you were sitting there watching. And I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed the show. Like, I didn't end the show being like, that was terrible. We're not going to get anything out of this. My thing was like, oh, that was really good. It's going to be hard to get an hour out of this because there's not a lot to make fun of or dissect. You know what I mean?
Right. All right. Well, that is going to be a wrap for this week's edition of Reliving the Extreme. As we say every week when we close out the show, make sure to let everybody know if they are an ECW fan, an old school wrestling fan, if they like a little bit of comedy with their wrestling sometimes, check out Reliving the Extreme. We are available anywhere you get your fine podcasts, or also on the YouTube as well, on the WNR Podcast Network, if that's how you prefer to listen to your podcasts. Join the WNR Podcast Network Facebook group. We post all the shows there. We do different discussions, different conversations in the group, and all that jazz. And like I said, big shout out to all the guys here at the network that we mentioned at the beginning of the show. I hope everybody's all right. I hope everybody's doing okay. And for those of you that listen that were in the path of the hurricane, we hope that you're doing okay too. So that being said, Aaron, I don't know if you have anything else to say, but we're going to sign off for the week.
No, just thanks for listening. Like Nate said, just best way to get a podcast out there is word of mouth and rate, review, and just keep doing that for us. And we got back up into the double digits, so I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Next week, I don't even know. Usually I like look ahead to see what's going to be maybe on next week's show. I didn't even look ahead this week, so I have no idea what we're looking forward to next week. But we will all find out together. And again, like I always say, if you're following along at home, I believe next week's episode is October 1st, 1996. If you want to watch it before the show drops. And we'll see you next time around, everybody. Have a great week.